Hello, I'm Kendra, and here at HappenstancePlace, we have been all about the home canning this summer, canning all the tomatoes. So now, in the month of October, I'm going to show you how, instead of canning all the things, how I cook all the things with all the things that we've canned. So today, I'm going to walk you through how to make our creamy tomato soup, which I talk about and make all the time. So here are the things that you will need, and you can substitute store-bought ingredients for these things, and it works just as well. So here I have 2 quarts of diced tomatoes. You could just go ahead and buy diced tomatoes from the store if you wish. You can also make this soup with fresh tomatoes, but it honestly tastes better with the canned variety. You're also going to need some baking soda for the magic at the end, a gallon of milk here. We're not going to use the whole thing, just about 2 or 3 cups. For seasonings, I have garlic, rosemary, basil, thyme, all of those out of our garden, as well as seasoned salt. You could use normal salt, but I really like the celery nature of the seasoned salt. And then to make a roux at the beginning, we're going to need some butter and some flour, as well as 1 pot, and then I use an immersion blender to make it all nice and smooth. So now, let's get to cooking. So we're going to start by making a roux. I'm just going to turn on my pot here. Now make sure that your pot is bigger than you think you need, because the last step is going to make your soup kind of foam up. And it will foam right over the top. It doesn't care what size your pan is, so make sure that's happening. So I'm going to throw my butter in there, get that to kind of melt, because we are going to make a roux. Basically, the roux is kind of one of the 2 secrets of this particular recipe, which my grandma developed from who knows where and has been made my entire life. So the roux kind of thickens the soup, makes it feel more hearty. It honestly makes it easier to eat because it's a little thicker. It stays in the spoon. And some really brothy tomato soups are kind of difficult to get from your cup to your mouth without spilling them all over yourself. Now this one's not guaranteed not to spill, but it probably won't spill quite as much. So once you have your butter working down and it's almost completely melted here, I turned down the fire a little. I have it on kind of a medium-high because I want to get this part going pretty quickly here. And I want most of it all the way melted before I add in my flour. Okay, now this is, I don't know, 1/2, 2/3 of a cup of flour. I just put in enough flour to see what the butter takes. I usually use whole wheat flour, but I'm out, so this is just regular white flour. And you're just going to kind of stir it in with your butter. You're looking for it to become kind of a grainy, dry thing. You don't want it to be like Play-Doh-y, and you don't want it to be super, super dry like just flour. You want it to kind of break up, and so all of that flour absorbs all of that butter. Okay, I'm going to add just a little bit more. And then you're going to just let this cook a little, because you want to cook out the raw flavor caused in your roux. If you don't let it cook that out, you're going to kind of taste a floury taste, and that's not what you're looking for when you're eating creamy tomato soup. Kind of bust up all those little chunks and just let it do its kind of a nice sandy texture. Okay, that looks good to me. It's not sticking to the bottom. This happens to be a non-stick pan. I have done it in a regular metal pan as well, and it works equally as well. It doesn't stick or anything. Okay, once you have that done, I'm just going to grab a jar opener and pop the lids on my jars. I made the good happy popping sound. So now I'm just going to pour 1 quart of tomatoes in. And you want to stir that up real good right away, because you don't want your roux to make little dumplings for you. You want it to incorporate with your tomatoes. You can use a whisk if you want. I find that since we can our tomatoes with the skins on, the skins just get stuck in my whisk, and I don't like that, so I just poke around with a wooden spoon. But if you're using commercially canned tomatoes that are all skinless, a whisk can make this go a little more smoothly. Alternatively, you can make this with tomato juice. I just don't find it to be as hearty. Again, probably because the skins aren't in there and all the solids are out. Okay, so it looks like I have one little dumpling bit to keep messing with. And then the roux is pretty well incorporated. Almost. A few little chunks will all get blended up, but you want to make sure that for the most part it's nice and blended in. And as you can see, it's already kind of thickened because of that roux. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the other jar in. Go. And just keep stirring everything together. Got a couple little lumps, just gonna squish that out over here. Okay. Now I'm gonna go ahead and add my seasonings while the tomatoes heat up. The seasonings, I'm gonna take some garlic powder, and I'm gonna take, I don't know, a good pinch, probably a tablespoon or more. I'll probably honestly put in 2 or 3 of those. We really like garlic. If it seems like too much garlic for most of you, then I probably would like just a little bit more. Then I'm going to close that up so it doesn't get moist and get all like rock hard and stuff. Now I'm going to add a little bit of rosemary. Again, I'm going to take about, I like to put my herbs in my palm of my hand like this. So I have, I don't know, about a tablespoon of rosemary. I'm going to crunch it up a little to release all the good flavors. And you don't have to worry about grinding it up too fine because it will go with the immersion blender here in a little bit. That smells delicious. My kitchen faux pas. I dropped my spice lid into my soup, so I'm going to dump that in the sink. Have to get a new lid for my rosemary. Oops. But that's what happens when you're actually cooking things. You actually drop stuff places it shouldn't be. Okay. Now we're going to add some basil. This is also dehydrated from the garden. So I'm going to, again, put some in my palm. Yeah, not that much. And I'm going to kind of break up those leaves a little as I put them in. Maybe I'll add a little bit more because, well, why not? We have plenty. And this I'm going to very carefully put the ring and the lid back on the jar so I don't drop it. And finally we have some thyme. Almost out of time. I'm gonna be all the way out of time. I'm gonna use the last of that. And then I'm gonna add my seasoned salt. I always like to give it a good little shake. And then we'll just look back at the pot. And I just eyeballed this. I kind of just shake it across the top till I get it to about a nice amount like that. And then I always like to add just a little bit of sugar when I use the canned tomatoes. It brightens the flavor and cuts any harsh acid taste. So we're just going to give that a stir. And this is a super, super quick soup to heat up because the tomatoes have already cooked when you are canning them. And I think it's equally as fast as dumping, you know, canned soup that's commercially prepared into a pan, but it tastes so much better. So you can let this cook for a while if that's the way you like to be. I'm usually rushing to get things done, so it's not going to cook super long. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes here, and then I will come back and show you how we're going to finish our soup off. This has just been cooking for 3 or 4 minutes here, just letting the flavors all meld together, and I've just been stirring it occasionally, making sure to run my spoon along the bottom edges because sometimes some roux will hide down there. And you want to try and get as much of that in your soup as you can. Now we're going to do the fun part. So I'm going to turn the heat off and grab my immersion blender or my stick blender or whatever you want to call it. You could do this with like by pouring it in a food processor or a blender or something. But then you have to deal with the hot splatter factor. But with the immersion blender, I just put it in and push the button. So here we go. First, it helps if you plug the immersion blender in. Now when I push the button, it should do its thing. Let's see. There we go. So I'm just going to break things up. Now that is done. My favorite part about this particular immersion blender is that the little, like, I don't know, the mechanical part pops right off, and then you have the little stick part, which is the part that needs to be cleaned. I usually just tap it off, and then I set it to the side of my spoon rest, and I deal with it when I'm done with the rest of my cooking. Now, we're going to get to the creamy part of this soup, which involves a little bit of milk. So I'm actually going to turn my heat back on low so that way it'll heat this milk through. And I'm just going to pour probably, I don't know, about 2 cups. Really depends on the size of your pot and the number of people you're trying to feed, because depending on the number or the amount of milk that you put in, you can stretch this. I have made this before with evaporated milk, also out of the cupboard if I found that I was out of milk, and it is tasty as well. We use whole milk and I enjoy that, but it is fairly good still even if you use skim. That's what we used growing up, was skim milk, and it turned out just fine. So I'm just going to stir that in and let it heat through just a little so the flavor incorporates, and then we're going to do the magic of this creamy tomato soup, which is adding the baking soda. I'm going to add kind of a heaping half teaspoon of baking soda, and it's going to emulsify and bubble up, and it keeps that milk from separating out from the tomatoes. So I'm going to take my, try not to get a chunk for no reason other than that I can't spread it around as much. So here we go, we got the baking soda. And then we put it on, and you'll see it's going to start to fizz immediately. And you just give it a little stir. And you see the bubbles start? It's the acid of the tomatoes reacting with the baking soda. And yes, I accidentally added too much a couple times ago when I made this, and it just kept fizzing and fizzing and fizzing. And it made this really nice, light, like foamy soup, but it almost overflowed the pan also. And that is not ideal. Now I'm going to turn this back off, and your soup is basically done at this point. You can serve it however you would like. And now your soup is ready to serve. I like to serve mine in mugs. I find that for myself and the kids, it is easier to eat it that way. I don't make as big of a mess. My husband, however, prefers to eat them out of a bowl because, well, that's just the way he is. It's also quite delicious with saltines in it all crumbled up. They absorb all nice and get all creamy and delicious. You can also serve this meal with either like grilled cheese sandwiches, or I will frequently make garlic bread, where I just take a loaf of French bread, cut it down the middle, put a little butter on it, sprinkle it with a little bit of the homemade garlic powder, and then a few shakes of some Parmesan cheese right out of the canister. Throw it in a low broiler for 2 to 3 minutes, and it gets nice and crispy, and sometimes gets a little blackened, and you have to scrape it off in the sink a little. But that's all right. You can dunk it in your soup or just eat it on the side. Makes a quick and easy meal, and we are ready for lunch after just like, I don't know, 10-15 minutes of cooking, because I put the effort in before and canned those tomatoes. If you'd like to see more of what we do with all the stuff we've been canning, you can watch me cook all the things from all the canned things all October long. And also subscribe down below for the daily vlogs, where you can just see generally how I go about canning the things and doing the things around here at Happenstance Place. See y'all next time. Bye!